Reading some of the stories on here reminded me of something that happened during my holidays this past Christmas. I went on a family holiday with my dad, mum and brother to Tasmania, which is kind of like a big island to the south of Australia. I wasn't terribly interested in the trip, just wanted to spend some time with my family, so I left all the bookings to my dad, and I never will again. He has his own Airbnb he manages, so I thought he would be able to find decent places on his own. When we rocked up to the Airbnb my dad booked, the first thought I had was, if I wanted to sell drugs, I would do it here. My mum wasn't impressed at all, and was already telling my dad off for booking it. I didn't say anything. Maybe the inside was nicer? It was a dingy little house. The paint was peeling, roof was rusty, and there were plants growing over the side of the building. There were 3 entrances. The first one I worked out was the entrance for the host. It looked okay, not as bad as our entrance. A little tidier. It went downstairs, so we figured out after a while the host would most likely live below us. The second looked like the main entrance to the house, but it was sealed shut. The door looked like it would break down if anyone was to even push on it, and it was obviously unused. The third was ours. Aside from the overgrown plants, it was fairly normal. From the looks of it, we figured out later that it looked like the host had divided the house up somehow. She lived below, we lived upstairs, and there was this half of the house upstairs that wasn't accounted for. Hard to explain, but the space we occupied only accounted for about half of the house, and it went up to the main entrance I spoke of, which is in the middle of the house. We checked in, just grabbed the keys. We didn't contact the host at this point. All was well on the inside. It looked a little bit old, but it wasn't creepy to get into. I did notice some odd things on the inside. I only mentioned this to my dad. There were a bunch of antique instruments displayed at the entrance. Right on top of one of the pianos were 3 things that looked like urns. And now to explain. I am of Chinese descent. These urns freak the fuck out of me, guys. Some people think they're for displaying, but we use them to store dead people's ashes, so I really didn't like them being there. I told my dad. He didn't like it either, but he went and tapped the urn to see if there was something in it. He couldn't tell though, but he mentioned the one he tapped was definitely the ones used for ashes. It had scripts on it for safe passage to the heavens, from what he could make out. After I stopped freaking out, I went and picked first dibs on the biggest room as per usual, but then I noticed there were heaps of mirrors around the room. Again, another thing. Not sure if it's a Chinese thing, but we don't like sleeping with mirrors facing us when we're in bed if we can help it. So I went to move one of them, which was smack bang in front of the bed. It was leaning against the door, and when I took the mirror away, the door actually opened ajar a little. That freaked me out. I got my dad and we decided it's better I slept with my mum in another room and he would take this room with my brother. There was another room, but it's getting so long I will explain in the comments if anybody is interested. Again, my dad, being a dad, he opened the door a little and shouted, "Hello!" before I told him to shut up. I had a peek inside, but I couldn't make out much. Only that it was dusty and seemed to be a part of the other half of the house. My dad soon after put a chair and his suitcase on top of it to keep the door shut. Fast forward to that night. Everyone was sleepy and went to bed. I stayed up a little because I had some emails from work to catch up on and went to work in the living room area. At one point in the night, around 11:30 p.m, I remember there were a few thumps on the roof. Sounded like someone's footsteps. Then followed by the loudest, most horrendous noise. It sounded like a train on top of me. There was screeching like steel on steel, and it lasted for maybe 30 seconds. I literally froze at that point. I didn't know what to do. I thought my dad would come check on me, but no one ever did. I didn't say anything the next morning because I've imagined it through my tiredness. The following night, the same thing again, except I was in bed this time. Just got into it, so not asleep yet. It was around the same time that this exact noise started up again. My mum woke up but was frozen like me. My dad came to check on us and we were all just frozen there listening to this noise, wondering what the hell it was. After it stopped, we were freaked out but managed to shrug it off and went to sleep. Before I fell asleep, I remember hearing some faint thumps that stopped shortly after it started. The next morning we kind of had a meeting of some sorts to discuss this. This is when I told them about the night before. We were extremely unsettled at this point, and luckily it was that day we checked out. We just got the hell out of there. We never found out what it was. The creepiest thing was, after we packed up and were well away from the place, Dad was driving but he looked really disturbed, so I asked him if he was okay. He said, I am now, but I did not have a good sleep last night. I pressed on and asked him was it the noise. He said no, that didn't bother him much compared to the other thing he experienced. What bothered him most was when we left for our tour on the second day. He still had his suitcase on top of the chair blocking the door in his room. He just showered, so he left the towel on the chair to hang. He said when we came back, he noticed the door was slightly ajar. The chair had moved slightly and the towel was on the floor, as if someone had tried to push from it from the other side. But unsuccessfully after they noticed there was a lot of stuff on the other end. I forced him to ask the host about the noise in the door. She replied that was the door to her art room, and the noise was just a possum on the roof. I do not believe her. The noise was not something an animal or even a human could make. Airbnb host, I hope we do not meet, ever.